Well, I'm talking with the esteemed composer and pianist and pedagogue, Nils Vigeland, and we're going to talk about the recent album that you have just released on New Focus Recordings. And it is a sort of a survey of your piano works over many, many years, over 29 different years. And I wonder if we can start by talking about each of the works on this album. And because they have such an interesting story, I wonder if you can tell us the background. Let's begin with your piano sonata, which is really two different kinds of time, for you.
Yes, I started the piece and wrote the first movement in 1979. It's about 12 minutes long. I thought of it as a self-sufficient piece, but playing it over the years, I more and more began to ask myself whether there was something else that could go with it. And finally, 29 years later, in 2008, I wrote the second and third movements rather quickly.
Yeah.
So that's a long gestation period, but I'm pleased with its present form.
So you didn't have any trouble picking up where you left off, as it were.
Well, I had changed a great deal, but I've listened to the piece a lot, and though I think uh, there's a different sense of the style of the last movement from the first, it picks up on elements that have always been present. In that sense, there is a continuous thread of certain kind of musical elements in all the movements.
Yeah. And what I hear in your music, the one thing that always catches the ear is your sense of surprise. It may not go where you expect it to go, but there are little parts and pieces that are familiar to you. And so you're you listen to it with fascination because you wonder where it's going to end up and where it's going to go. Is that a fair assessment, you think?
I'm pleased that you mentioned that because I'm very fond of a line of Wagner, which he says, music is the art of transition.
Mm,
And I'm most interested in this idea of expectation surprise. How do you satisfy both impulses?
yeah. Let's talk about the Nine Waltzes and an Echoes, which is a Scottish folk dance for people who don't know. That was inspired by Franz Schubert. Can you tell us about that piece?
Well, one of the many things I've done in my life is I was a ballet pianist for classes. And of course, you have to dig around for music which is symmetrical and fits certain rhythmic patterns and tempo patterns. So the Schubert waltzes, which are generally very short and in 8 bar, 16 bar phrases, fit perfectly in this category. So I played these pieces like crazy in my teens and 20s when I was doing this work, and I love the pieces. And this piece came out very fast. It's probably the most unusual piece stylistically on the record because it has such a strong relation. Two of the pieces are paraphrases of Schubert waltzes.
Nice. Let's talk about I'm going to have to pronounce this. Let's see.
Mnemosyne.
Mnemosyne, is that how you?
There are two, Mnemosyne or Mnemosyne. Both of them are acceptable pronunciation.
Okay. That's a portrait of your colleague. I wonder if you can talk about that as well.
Well, I studied the piano all through high school, and then when I got to college, I continued playing, but I didn't study with anyone. And then when I went back to grad school as a composer, I used to play in student composition concerts. And one of the piano faculty, Ivar Mikashov, this was at a university at Buffalo, said, "Why don't you take lessons?" And I said, "Can I do this?" He said, "Sure, get a double degree." So I got a master's in piano, and he revived my interest. I said, "I don't want to play any classical music." And he said, "That's okay." So my repertoire was the Ives First Sonata, Debussy Etudes, and some Stravinsky pieces. And he said, "That's fine if that's what you want to play." And he got me back playing again. And not only that, he was tremendously supportive of my own music. I would say until his untimely death in 1994, he was probably responsible for close to half of the performances of my music through not only his own playing, but he was also an entrepreneur and concert organizer in Holland and England.
Yeah. I think he also commissioned the work that I sang for you back in the day. I read that somewhere, but I can't
Oh, well,
for sure.
that piece was first performed by the English National Opera, and
Right.
he responsible for that commission.
Yeah, that's so interesting, the connections there. Well, your last track is the title track, Perfect Happiness. I wonder if you can talk about the piece and what you mean by perfect happiness.
Well, the piece is dedicated to my mother on the occasion of her 81st birthday. And when you're writing a piece for your mother and she's 81, you want to do something positive. So it started off with a piece which I think is unambiguously, if cheerful is the wrong word, I would say contented. And then I began to ask myself, how could you continue this piece? The pieces are short. The first three are under a minute and a half. Only the last one is quite a bit longer. So the first movement I thought of as being an expression of contentedness, then the second movement of serenity, and then the third movement of ecstasy, and then the last movement, which is the longest and probably the most contradictory, is willfulness. And after I gave the first performance of the piece at Manhattan School of Music, where I taught for 30 years, some of my students came up and said, we don't understand the title, which seemed to suggest to them that it contradicted their idea of what perfect happiness would be. And I tried to explain to them that I thought it wasn't one thing, but many facets. And the form of it is perhaps indicative of something you mentioned already, this element of surprise. Whether or not you express that in movements or in a continuous spectrum. And two of these pieces are continuous and two of them are fragmentary in that they're short things which interconnect but are broken.
Yeah, I was surprised that it ended so quickly. Right?
Well, how long to go on is another big question.
Yeah.
I studied for 3 years with Morton Feldman, whose line at the time I was studying with him, what the world doesn't need now is another 20-minute piece.
Yeah.
And I think if you've written music as long as I have, after a while you get a kind of duration which seems right for you. And
Yeah.
although I have just finished a 100-minute piano piece, I think 6 to 15 minutes is about my idea of the right length.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that you taught at the Manhattan School of Music for 30 years. You retired in 2013 as the chair of the composition department. A couple of your students have been on this show in recent years. Scott Wolschlager and Reiko Futing, who I'm going to talk with Reiko next month, actually, about his latest album.
Yes, it's extremely satisfying when people who are your students succeed so well in
Yeah.
this very difficult profession.
So
Scott,
you've had a lot of students over the
I,
years.
I had many,
Yeah.
and I remember them all well.
Yeah, that's great. Well, can you talk about your pianist? Because that's the one thing we haven't talked about that is so integral to the success of this disc. That's John Yang, or Jing Yang, rather. I wonder if you can talk about her.
Well, I got to know her through Reiko Futing because she had recorded on two of Reiko's CDs. She was at Manhattan School, but after the time that I was there, so I didn't know her when she was a student at the school. And he just said, I don't think there's anyone better. And when I met her, not only is she a spectacular pianist, but she's one of the most cheerful and outgoing people I know. An absolute joy to work with. I could not be more pleased with these performances.
That's wonderful. I've been talking with pianist, composer, pedagogue Nils Vigeland about his album of piano works, which is called Perfect Happiness. That's performed by pianist Jing Yang on New Focus recordings, available on all the major streaming platforms, and we'll link to it from our website as well. Nils Vigeland, it's wonderful to see you again. Thank you for the music. Thank you for the discussion. And happy birthday to you.
Thank you, sir. So good to see you again.